Hi, I'm Mike.
I'm Catherine.
Hi, and we're here today to talk about student assessment and evaluation. Uh, we thought and we really struggled with where we were going to go. We first thought about report cards. There's so many different ways report cards are done these days, and we thought, from a leadership perspective, what can we do with that? And we're like, that could be just too broad. Then we looked at like best practices, formative and summative assessment. What's the best thing that we can do? Sorry, that's my wife. And when we were looking at that from a leadership perspective, what are we trying to do with instructional leadership with that? And we thought, you know what? I think what we need to do is stick with the data. And so the direction we're going to go with this provocation is going to be looking at student assessment and evaluation and how we use the data from that to better the instruction and the practices within our school. We're also going to be linking it to the leadership quality standards as well. So get ready. I hope you guys learn a few things, and if not, hope to, through your comments, to learn many, many things from you guys.
Sounds good. All right.
Okay. So one of the first things that we want to do is we want to look at how does student data drive decisions within your school when it comes to resource allocation, whether it is primarily through, I guess, human capital, technology, possibly just looking at just overall resources, financial, and then also what data is used regarding student evaluation to make these decisions. So from my own context, we looked at formative and summative assessment. We look at the FMP, the MIPI, STARS, a lot of anecdotals. We do a lot of common assessments. Teachers will do observations. This year we're going to do PATs, but we used to be grade 9s, now we're grade 6s. So we're kind of at a new starting point with that. We really look at our accountability pillars, and we do, maybe not as much as we want to, look at our school plan and goals as it pertains to what the province wants and also what our school division wants. We use this data to make everyday decisions, but also how the school runs day to day and in the long term, because it's not just 1 year. We're looking at 3 to 5 years, a best way to allocate our resources. Again, going back to human capital, financial, PD, so many different things that you can think of for resources. F&P has been big in my division. One of the problems we ran into as we formed to a middle school this year from a junior high is we had inconsistency across all grades, all teachers when they tested. And that was a problem because I came out and said, I don't trust the data because I don't think everybody's on the same page of how to actually do the F&P testing correctly. So the conversation with the other two administrators in the school, we allocated significant dollars to bring in people, subs, create time to make sure that F&P testing was done, because we actually use our F&P quite a bit. Part of it is obviously for instruction, part of our CRM. And the other part of it is when we make class lists for the following year, we'll use the F&P testing because we want to make sure that we balance out the classes, or if we want to, we got an opportunity, we can overload a class with struggling readers so that we can actually focus on giving them the best instruction possible. So.
Yeah, so I'm going to piggyback on Mike for this one. In our school, we're fortunate enough is that we have our assessments are the exact same as Mike's, except we're just starting. So this year we just started the MIPI, we just started the STAR. We've always used Fountas and Pinnell for various in various schools. It hasn't been consistent across our district. So we've got the biggest thing that drives our staffing at our site, and this is not throughout our district. We're a very unique school, as I'm sure you figured out, is that our feedback during CTM times, as well as tabling, which is based upon the needs of our students and our CST, as well as our optimal learning consultants that come in, we're able to change our days and support our kids depending on what we're seeing in our CTM times. At the high school level, they're used more than they are the standardized tests. As well, for teachers who do well with the PATs or diplomas, they actually tend to stay in their positions, or if they don't do well, they may be shuffled around. We'll get into that a little later. But the STAR and MIPI are used traditionally, but it's really the PATs, especially at the grade 12 level. And at times, the decisions aren't solely made on the PATs, and it often becomes a supervision issue with the TQS and the LQS. So the next topic that we're going to go through is leadership, which is how we choose as teachers and administration to use the data within our school, and what do we do with it. So I'm going to hand it over to Mike.
So when we were looking through this, we were trying to look through and find a bunch of literature to help us with, I guess, our own arguments, or to help guide you. And my discovery is that we used to have some administrative policies a few years ago around assessment, around student evaluation and assessment, and it disappeared. And we've had a changeover in superintendents. We've done some new administrative policies. It's been interesting. So I made a phone call to our associate superintendent on Friday, and he was able to tell me they're in the works. So as of right now, it is school-based decisions on how we use the data within our own schools to, I guess, best impact instruction. So basically, yeah, we're on our own, but hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have something. I'm just going to take a quick look at the LQS for a second.
You share it, Mike?
I'm going. Give me a sec. Okay. So one of the things, well, actually, when we looked at this, there were three things that, in terms of using data, when managing the school operations and resources, the biggest thing there is identifying and planning for areas of needs. You got to have the data to back up when you make decisions, especially when it comes to instruction and supporting the students within the school. Also, even supporting the staff within the school. The other thing is aligning practices, procedures, policies, decisions, and resources with school and school authority vision, goals, and priorities. We are required by law to follow goals and policies set up by the provincial government, and also by our own school divisions. So how are we allocating our resources to impact in the instruction? We have a large focus on literacy. So the expectation is that some of our goals, a lot of our time, a lot of our financial resources are going towards literacy this year. And I know next year there's going to be a big push for numeracy. Then looking at D, and D is a fascinating descriptor, as it says, following through a decision made by allocating resources, human, physical, technological, and financial, to provide the learning environments and supports needed to enable and or improve learning for all students. You know, as we'll touch on later, it's the idea of human capital. In my context of being an administrator for about 5 years now, human capital can be an interesting conversation because you're essentially putting teachers into spots where you hope they have the best success in instructing students. So a lot of times with the hiring and there's transfers going on, even the transfers within your own school. I know a couple times we've changed teachers from different subjects, or even with different grades, because the relationships and their abilities just didn't lend itself well to being in those areas. So sometimes you have to have the tough conversations to move people. And but again, that comes back to identifying and planning for areas of needs. So.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
You have to stop sharing your screen so I can read my next part.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
How do I unshare?
I don't know.
Oh, got it. Never mind.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, we're going to be that group, people.
We are. I really don't like technology, so
I do. I just haven't practiced with it.
I'll get there. I'll get there, I promise. So unlike Mike's division, I actually really learned a lot from Mike because we have policy and we have a ton of policy when it comes to assessment and reporting and evaluation of teachers. And it all links back within the School Act, as well as different policies within there and regulations as recent as 2006 that are also current until now. So formative assessment for our district, if we're going back to that, it causes a lot of dialogue between and with our OLCs to come in and help, as well as connections with outside resources in our community. Medicine Hat is really fortunate that almost every single school has a team of PT, OT, mental health that is actually based within the school twice a month to 3 times a month. And we have a great behavior support team that will actually come in and do some intensive intervention with us, which is not very common. So those assessments are used to help those students within an inclusive setting. A little bit different, I think, than we would get in the high school setting here in town. So it's really up to individual teachers as well as administration as they review our outcome-based report cards, because that's what we're moving towards. And they'll conference with our teachers and team to help. At the high school level, formative assessment is used to provide extra time, making sure that professional learning is focused and department heads are aware of what's going on in their departments. The data drives the decision and focus, as well as budgets and allocations are used based on our data from the accountability pillars, as well as last year's provincial achievement exams. And I'm thinking this year with the MIPI and the STAR, that's also going to drive it for this year as of March 1st. So for us, our policy 411, which is allocation in instructional block resources and respective responsibilities, that is a huge section that goes through all of the different ways and all the different funding that goes along with that. As well, when I first started out, I was fortunate enough to be part of our ATA local PD council. My mother-in-law hired me onto that. That's another story for another day. But it was, our PD handbook was followed in the past. We were fortunate enough to have early Wednesdays 12 years ago when I started teaching. But these days would be used to look over data from our assessments or to build in units and projects collectively in order to move our students forward at their level. Unfortunately, about 5 or 6 years ago, our school board decided to take them away because our parents had a big complaint about childcare, which makes sense now that I'm a parent. Back then, I didn't quite understand it. But basically what we did is we moved towards every second month, we'd have a district PLC day where we would work together. And then that PD handbook drove that discussion, but we were also obligated through our teacher and professional growth plan to follow various outcomes that were in there. So for the last 2 years, we haven't had district-wide PLCs, and we've moved towards an optimal learning consultant PD sessions, which are after school. So on our times, this is what happens in my classroom when the lights go off because they don't move long enough. So it's been meant that the teachers are now working on their own time to analyze the results and to put into play best practices, even though our PD handbook is there. So we have that PD handbook, but it's not used as much. And it really doesn't talk about middle teachers. It just is a lot about beginning teachers and teachers who are struggling. So then our school plans are made each year in August, and the accountability pillar is used for that. And we see lots of results within our school year, and we always have access to that school plan. But then when planning for our school calendar, our principals also need to keep in mind the section 225 within the student record policy regulation, which specifically policies K and L. These are actually paralleled within my own district's document that I'm going to attempt to share with you right now, which is in our policy 630. And you can still see me even though the lights are off. That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to share the screens now. If you guys understood what Mike and I have gone through for the last couple minutes, this is just really funny. Okay, here we go. So the documents that I'm looking at, so you can see our lovely school heading. So for us, it's right in here, and this is actually within the government document that I found, which is right, no, I don't know where I put it. I'm not even gonna lie. it's in there. It'll be in our reference list. I promise to show that with you. So each school is required to develop a specific procedures for the assessment of student achievement. So that goes back to our district reporting, which is really interesting because as we move towards more things like Fresh Grade and Power School and outcomes-based reporting, we have to make sure that we're following the regulations set out within the School Act, as well as within our own district policy. So this guy here talks about that. And then I found another policy within our district, which is reporting student achievement. So we actually have a whole section that talks about how we are supposed to report and how we are supposed to conference. So we have to do that 3 times a year, which is actually in the School Act as well. It's said at the end of every term. And then the first signature may be a record of having participated in a face-to-face conference, which is actually what we ended up doing at the beginning of this year because we're piloting our new district report card. We have another document that deals just with student assessment, but that's in the subsection. We have a lot of documents. So I'm not gonna go through them all because if you're really interested or you need a cure for your insomnia, please feel free to go back and look. All right, I'm gonna turn it back over to Mike.
Okay, so we can't talk about student assessment and evaluation without talking about SLAs, BATs, and the diplomas. I'm just gonna refer to them as DIPs because that's what we refer to them up here as. So, as an administrator the last 5 years, I've really gotten to really get involved with provincial achievement tests. And there's a big difference between how I view them as a teacher and how I view them now as an administrator. When we were able to get the results in September, the report that comes out with it is actually incredible. And it was never really shared with me until I guess with my 6th or 7th year teaching. And I had zero idea that I could look at every outcome and see how well students did. Also in comparison to, how they did against other kids in Alberta. It was absolutely tremendous. When I came to the school I'm at right now, HW Pickup, there was already a practice in place where the teachers would actually demand this data and go through it with a fine tooth and comb and everything and really look at the outcomes and figure out where did they do well, where did the kids struggle. This opened up really amazing conversations in the subject level, within the grade level, about what can we do to support these kids, our own teaching, to do better. It was a sense of pride in our school to do really well on the PATs. And it wasn't just for the grade 9 teachers, it was for the grade 8 teachers and the grade 7 teachers, because we did a lot of vertical meetings. So just taking in with the grade 7 math, the grade 8 math and the grade 9 math, they would actually sit down during a PD day and take a look at all the outcomes, analyze it, good or bad. They would do a little bit of mapping about how some of these connected into grade 8, into grade 7. And if we saw some similar struggles from grade 7 to grade 8 and grade 8 to 9, we put some plans in place, or at least they did. And then they would communicate with us later and say, we're going to focus more on these in grade 7, so that's going to be easier for them in grade 8. And then we can expand more on these other outcomes in grade 8, so you can focus more on these outcomes where kids are clearly struggling in grade 9. And fantastic. I was like, wow, this is what we got to do for everything. So this year, we've kind of put some seeds in place, not just with the PATs, but with some other common assessments that we want to do to analyze, outcomes there. I know at our high school, our diploma exams, they do typically look at the outcomes and decide. But I also know too, in Catherine's conversation with Catherine, if you're not able to, I guess, have your students do well on diplomas, sometimes there's some shifting around, and that's part of the human capital. And that's sometimes just part of the reality as well, because regardless of what your opinion is on diplomas, on provincial achievement tests, they're still viewed by the public, and some of the public still see them as an assessment of the school. Whether that's fair or not, it's out there for everyone to judge. And when you're an administrator and you have a superintendent asking about your provincial achievement tests and what are you doing to improve them, you got to be able to show the data, the decisions that you're making is to improve them. And if you're not doing anything, well, you yourself might get removed as well. So,
Mike, can I jump in and talk about the ATA links that we've got as well, so that it will help that? So like Mike was saying, a lot of when you are a principal, and Mike deals with this, obviously, I'm on the other end of it, but we have a lot of professional conduct written up in our ATA within Barnett House, within our collective agreements, and within our policy. So I'm going to share with you really quick just the documentation that we found in regards to that. This I really found great for professional development, needs assessment, and processing strategies. It's got a lot of great tips for beginning administrators on how to move your staff forward in ways that follow our code of conduct and what we professionally need to do. And it deals with beginning, middle, and end of career teachers. As well, we've got something that I can't see because I need to move my Google. We've got our teaching competencies as well. And this large section right here, what's incompetent professional practice, it goes through and it links to the teaching quality standard, which is obviously not the new one, but I'm thinking that they'll update that. And then it just talks about the different ways for complaint and the review processes and why you have to do it. This is the big one though, the code of professional conduct. So when we are thinking about evaluation and assessment, especially of teachers and of staff, and the way that we want to work together to build one another up for collaboration, we really have to be mindful with how we are I don't want to say involving with one another, but how we're working with one another and the way that we talk to one another, how we encourage each other, and making sure that we all understand the governance that we're bonded by, so that we are not overstepping where we may lie.
I agree with you 100%. And, as with anything here, the code of conduct is, I don't want to say number one, but it's always something you need to consider. Even with the sharing of data, making sure that it is, it is sensitive data and you're not sharing it around with, everybody, just the people that you need to know. So.
And the McCall-Thomas article that you guys are going to see in our reference list is a great place to start. I would think, even as if you have different grades that are struggling with their SLAs or their accountability pillar pieces or your PAT exams, it's a really interesting article that deals with evidence as for achievement that is tied to school funding. Mm-hmm. So I think for our recap, Mike and I just want to go through really quickly what our guiding question is and our provocation is for you guys this week, now that we have showed you how we are not using our technology that is in our professional growth plan that we need to get better on.
Maybe in yours, I'm fine.
So we've got, we have to think about when we're doing this with assessment evaluation. So data, if it's there, so it's a question of, for the data, is if, when, and why you would want to use it. So our driving question is, how does student assessment and evaluation impact decision-making in your school? And then there are 3 guidelines. Mike, do you want to read those or do you want me to?
Well, here, why don't we share it?
Sure, perfect. Oh, right, I forgot. Good thing you're on the ball tonight, buddy.
No, I forgot the other thing, so don't worry. And I forgot to unshare.
What?
Nothing, don't worry. We're doing well.
That's good. I just want to, okay. So here's our driving question. So yet again, I'm going to say this again. So how does school assessment and evaluation impact decision-making in your school? So we're looking in terms of guidelines. Is student data used to drive decisions regarding resource allocation in your school or division? What data is used regarding student evaluation / assessment to make these decisions? And B, in your setting, what's the connection between formative assessment, leadership, and resource allocation? C, how does the data from standardized assessments impact leadership management practices in your setting, and what is the evidence? So hopefully by Mike and I talking to you guys about what we see in our divisions, it will give you some ideas on where to start looking and talking.
Like, in just one more sharing spot here, lot of the data that we collect, whether it's from the PAT, the FMP, even the MIPI now, we'll use it to drive our professional development calendar for the following year. Or if there's opportunities during the current year, we will change that. And we're also heavily involved in a collaborative response model and RPD days. What we do with our embedded time is really, the data impacts what we do on those days. And people who are, I would say schools that are not using the data, really need to look at what the possibilities are and what you're missing out on if you're not using them. So
yeah,
anyway,
that's like us too. We're using the CTM for the first time, and we get every Wednesday. So our administrators have blocked us into chunks so that every Wednesday we've got 45 minutes to work with our group on the data that we're seeing from these results. And our OLCs are always there, as well as our classroom support teacher. It's pretty amazing. So anyways, go ahead, Mike.
So we're going to end it because we've been talking for a while, and we may have outdone Janet and Dwayne.
Hopefully we're funny though.
Well, or incompetent, one of the two.
Yeah,
but we're really looking forward to see what your guys' responses are. There's a lot of things out there, and I'm really curious because I'm looking at this as an opportunity to learn from you and from your divisions, because we don't have all the answers. And I think there's some really strong growing opportunities here for Catherine and myself.
Yep. So please share with us whatever you get. We'd love to see it.
Awesome. All right. Good luck to everybody.
See you guys later.
In the summer.